About the book. I think of this book first and foremost as a philosophy book about strategy. Like most philosophical books, it's voluminous compared to its content, because much of it is dedicated to defining and redefining underlying concepts and fundamentals, trying to find the words to describe something that isn't automatically implied by the usual understanding of the words used. The lack of concrete specifics is intentional, because they won't pertain to very many people. The approach is deliberately open-ended, to make the concepts applicable to as many different situations as possible. This may also mean that the concepts, which aim to create conciliant and resilient structures, are applicable to other kinds of organizing, like policymaking or business management. This book isn't a how-to manual to a specific lifestyle, but a how-to manual for how-to manuals. The intention is for each person to create his own strategy. In this sense, this book isn't a travel journal, nor is it a set of map directions. It's a book that teaches you to become a navigator. I used the principles in this book to reduce my expenses to a quarter of the average person and become financially independent in 5 years. While my story may be entertaining or inspiring, it may not be directly useful towards reaching a similar goal. Similarly, while initially motivating due to their actionable form, a set of map directions would fail the first time one reaches a crossroads not on the map. This would end the journey if the pilot has no navigational skills. I have therefore written the book as a textbook. Learning how to become financially independent requires study. This requires effort and is not easy. If it was truly easy, everybody would be doing it. But it's no more difficult than getting a college education or becoming a skilled tradesman in your respective field. What I'll describe here is another kind of life, the life of an independently wealthy and widely skilled person, a modern Renaissance man. A note about the difficulty level. This isn't a book for beginners. It's not a book one can listen to and proceed to become financially independent, just as reading a textbook about physics won't turn a person into a physicist. This only happens when the concepts are constantly applied and one starts thinking like a physicist. Things are similar for a person pursuing financial independence. This is a book which I think can be consumed at several different levels. The reason for different levels is that people change as they learn. Depending on where you are, the book will relate to you in different ways. This is good, because those who evolve will become different people, eventually. What used to seem like a sacrifice will seem natural, and what used to seem natural will come to be seen as a sacrifice. What used to be a collection of techniques will become a general principle. What used to feel challenging will now feel easy. A note about getting started. You don't need to learn everything before getting started. After all, you can drive a car without knowing how the engine works. In fact, you can drive several different kinds of cars. This is because most cars handle the same. However, to stay with the analogy, the same car can be driven with very different gas mileages. It may be listed as 33 miles per gallon, but good technique can double that number, and poor technique can cut it in half. A trivial technique is to reduce speed by 5 miles per hour, which will simply bring most drivers back to the speed limit. Similarly, if living is thought of as driving a particular kind of vehicle, there are techniques in this book which can be applied without understanding exactly why they work. Understanding why they work will subsequently allow one to tweak and improve them. A note about references. This is not an academic work. I have resisted the temptation to follow the medievally inspired academic tradition of citing old books to make statements based on authority. I find that showing the derivation from basic principles is more useful for application. A note about geography. While this book is somewhat US-centric in its examples, the methods should work in any developed country with a market economy. Retirement plans have different names from country to country, but every country offers very similar plans to its citizens. In some countries, healthcare is paid through taxes, and in other countries it's paid out of pocket. In any case, the prices for goods and services are similar in developed countries, so the strategies in this book will work even if technical details differ. A note about originality. Feynman once remarked that the best way to find new insights into a problem was to step out of the box, ignore previous publications, and come to your own conclusions. With such an approach, it often happens that a concept which is initially considered to be novel turns out to have been discovered already. In fact, many of the ideas in this book go back decades and even centuries. To give an example, when I was a teenager, I wasted a lot of my time playing computer games. One genre I particularly enjoyed was real-time strategy. Games like Doom, Warcraft 1 and 2, and Command and Conquer. In these games, you build up forces comprised of individual units, such as tanks and warriors. When these units fight, each fights at full strength until it's destroyed or killed. Since the rate of attrition depends on the number of weapons firing or striking, the optimal strategy in a battle is therefore for all your units to attack a single individual enemy at a time, to reduce the number of enemies firing or striking as fast as possible. A great many players have independently discovered this strategy, called Lanchester's Square Law, without being aware that it had actually already been discovered by Frederick W. Lanchester during World War I. So it is with many observations about life in general. This, incidentally, is why reading the classics is very worthwhile. Concepts get discovered, forgotten, and then rediscovered, either independently or by reading old books. Like Lanchester's Law, I discovered many of the concepts in this book only to find out later that someone else had already discovered and named the concept before me. Further reading revealed that yet others had written about the concept before them, and so on. For example, I found that the quadrants in Chapter 3 are similar to the Cash Flow Quadrant book by Robert Kiyosaki, even as they were inspired by the types described in Maccabee's earlier book, The Gamesman, and the arrangement itself, the dimensions, comes from Charles Perrow's normal accident theory. Analogously, I'm sure that Lanchester wasn't the first person to think about how to most effectively direct the fire of siege trebuchets. A note about completeness. There's always the temptation to make a book complete. However, a line must be drawn lest the book grow to the size of a minor encyclopedia. After all, the quantity of knowledge that must be mastered is not trivial, and thus I can't describe everything. However, I hope I've used enough relevant keywords to allow a quick search on the internet for more information. In all cases, I've striven to use standard words rather than jargon.